Hey,
All
Graham.
right.
How are you?
Good. How are
Oh,
you? This is a better question.
having a
What's going on?
nothing.
What's been
That's been
happening?
real mellow, really chill. Yeah, things have been very relaxing for me the past few weeks.
Yeah,
I've
I'm
been getting a
sure.
lot of
Not
sleep,
stressful at all.
and I've been eating very healthy. So,
Yeah.
yeah, no,
Glad
it's
to hear
wild.
that. Very maha of you.
How much time you got, by the way?
I honestly, let me look at the schedule. I don't think I've got anything. I've got I got essentially as long as we need. So.
All right. Well, there's a lot of
Amazing.
fun. There's a lot of fun, a lot of good, a lot of probing questions that we
Sweet.
got that we can get to. But to start, Crystal or anybody want to start with anything from yourself before we get to the audience?
Yeah. Yeah, let's go ahead. I mean, Graham, I do just want to know, like, you've been a candidate for a while, but this is really your first time with this level of like heated national media scrutiny. And so what has that been like for you? What has that experience been like?
I keep having to point this out to people. I've only been a candidate for like 10 weeks. Like this thing.
That's kind of crazy, actually.
We didn't launch until August 19th. And the whole conversation around the launch started at the beginning of August. So I mean, like, end of July, none of this was remotely on my plate. I was still like legitimately just farming oysters in Sullivan and having a very normal existence. So yeah, it is. I feel like I inhabit two worlds where there's like the whole politics pundit class world, which I don't actually spend a lot of time in at all. But obviously I interact with it because people send me stuff and I see things. But then there's like the actual world I inhabit, which is still Eastern Maine where I live. And that's like a totally different world. That's like, that remains to be very normal. And all the people that I know still know me. And we all like everybody's incredibly supportive. And then as we've been going around the state doing all the town hall stuff, that continues to be people turn out in droves and they want to talk and they want to engage. And yeah, I mean, it's just funny that it's like the national media sphere, which I've always had a lot of cynicism and frankly, like skepticism about, the past like 2 weeks of my life. I'm just like, yeah, well, that's all made up. So, yeah.
Yeah. Well, I saw this extraordinary report from Alex Seitzwald, who I used to work with back in the day at MSNBC, and he went from being a reporter from NBC to, I guess, starting a local Maine news outlet, which I didn't realize.
Villager. And of course, because it's Maine,
and so,
like we all know a lot of the same people. Unsurprising.
I'm sure you do. Yeah, so I saw him doing a report on MSNBC, and he's like, guys, this is the biggest disconnect I've ever seen between on the ground and national media coverage. And I have tried to find anyone who has like turned on Graham over the Reddit story, over the tattoo. And I have tried really hard and I can't find anyone. And I'm curious if you have found, I mean, obviously you had a campaign personnel who departed who has turned on you. So we've got that one certainly publicly. But I wonder if, you have had people in person tell you, that they're upset or they're disappointed or they're switching support. What have you experienced with that regard?
Only one person has texted me saying that and it was actually, it's a very weird one too, because essentially they completely misread a comment I made like 8 years ago. And they're like, I didn't get defensive about it, but like what they referenced, I'm like, I never even said what you thought I said. You clearly didn't even read anything, but that's okay. One, and the rest has just been overwhelming amounts of support. I mean, like my phone is a nightmare, but not because people are mad at me. My phone's a nightmare because I have hundreds of missed messages of people just saying, stick with it. This is insane. It's all like, yeah, overwhelming support. And so, but there was one person who was like, I can't abide it. And then I read why, and I was like, I never even said that, dude. But I'm not gonna, I don't take things very personally. So it's fine. I'm not gonna get into it.
What do you say to lefties who are worried about getting Fetterman?
If I was me, looking at me, I would worry about the same thing. So I mean, I get it. We've been burned before. I think a couple things I would say is there were plenty of hints around Fetterman early on that maybe things weren't quite what they seemed. I don't, despite what people are claiming are in my Reddit posts, I think my Reddit posts show a fairly, like,
What would you flag as those hints? I agree with you, and I think we elevated some of them, probably,
Yeah.
but not enough to our discredit. What do you think are some of those hints
for Fetterman? I mean,
Yeah.
Israel from the get-go. You know, there was and
Yeah.
and then also like there was a lot of that kind of shying away even early on from, I would say, more like progressive social change, like trying to, and I don't shy away from that. I mean, I it's not the core of what we're doing here. I think economic social justice or economic justice is the core of what needs to be done. But I'm also not willing to, frankly, back off wins that we've had towards justice and equality in this country. And I'm very blunt about that. So yeah, and then there's also the element that, and I don't like, Fetterman was trying to get into politics for a long time. I still don't really want to be doing this in some ways. I'm doing this because because I have. I mean, I didn't go looking for it. I was approached with this idea. There is a moment in history right now where I think my kind of politics, the politics I want to see in politics, is just ripe for developing, and that's why I'm doing it.
Yeah.
I've not been. I mean, everybody likes pointing out I have no background in politics, and I don't. I mean, I have a very political background, but not in electoral politics and campaigning, because the kind of politics I look at, I view as, it's very power focused and it's very organizing focused. And that's where I've put my energy for years at this point. But that's also what we're doing with this campaign. So.
And what do you say to, because I look back on Fetterman and it's like, this is a guy who came from a very good background and was kind of doing what people would say was like the stolen working class valor, like walking around as though he was just, in his t-shirts and his Carhartts and the like. What do you say to people who are now bringing up like your boarding school and all of that sort of thing? Like, what's your response? Because there's been some of that circulating.
Yeah, look, my grandfather was a architect who worked with Saarinen and a few others. Who he's not like famous, but he designed windows on the World. He designed the lobby at the St. Louis Arch, a few of these things, and. Yeah,
it's pretty cool.
Very cool. No, and but it's very funny too, because growing up, like, I knew my grandfather was like an architect, but I didn't know what that meant. And there's also this kind of weird thing where, like, I mean, my parents, like, I grew up in Eastern Maine. Like, my mom has been, she doesn't have a college degree. She started a restaurant in the 1970s in Bar Harbor. And she's essentially been a serial entrepreneur in the food industry since. She still runs a restaurant to this day because she has no money. And she can't retire. I mean, she's in her 70s and she's still running a restaurant. Like, it's my dad was a small town lawyer. And I mean, I grew up, I would say, like, solidly middle class, but also in Eastern Maine. So there's this weird mix of, I mean, I got my first W-2 job before I went to high school. Like, I worked all through high school. I washed dishes. I did landscaping. I worked on the Appalachian Mountain Club's trail crew. I bagged groceries and pushed carts at Hannaford. I mean, I have always worked since, and I come from a family, I don't know, like that's just kind of what you do. And I know that they're trying to frame me as some like silver spoon rich kid, but I'm sorry. Like, to anybody that like comes down here and asks around about how I grew up, and everybody in here knows it's nonsense. But my mom did want me to go to a good high school, and the local school, which I wanted to go to, had lost its accreditation through the state in like 99. And so there were a number of families around here that sent their kids up to Bangor to go to John Baptist, which at the time was just kind of like, it was a private school, but it's weird, and it wasn't like Choate or something. My mom did try to send me to Hotchkiss for half a semester in the beginning of my sophomore year, and I realized I was the only kid who'd ever worked, and I hated everybody, and so I got myself thrown out because I found out that if you don't go to class in prep school, they just send you home. And
maybe a formative experience for you, actually.
Deep. I mean, without exaggeration, deeply. I had never engaged with people with like that kind of wealth and lifestyle. It was. I mean, my middle school had there were like 13 kids in my graduating class. You know, like I grew up in a really tiny town, and Eastern Maine is full of a lot of poverty. So, yeah.
Now, does Maine have? I know Vermont has this thing, but does Maine have the thing where if your high school loses its state accreditation, then the local town subsidizes the private school tuition? And in other words, did the town then subsidize the private school?
Because the year after the school got its accreditation back.
Okay, so then you lose.
But at
the
that
subsidy.
point, my mom was just like, "Well, you're going to this high school because it's where you've started." And like at that point, I liked going there. I mean, it was a good school. I got a great high school education. It was also cool. It's in Bangor. I drove an hour from Sullivan. And there were other kids that went to John Baptist who drove an hour from all the other directions. So I met kids from all over the state of Maine. And it was an interesting mix because you had like kids from like wealthy families, you know, car dealerships, that kind of thing. And then there were a lot of kids who just went there because it was a good school and they got in. And they, you know, they kids that lived in mobile home parks. But it was a very Maine wealth in Maine is interesting. I think it actually gives us a different. It's actually why I think our politics is kind of the way it can be, because there's this weird mix of ultra rich and ultra poor, but everybody still inhabits the same space and people know each other. It's weird. It's weird. Yeah.
Yeah. I mean, that is something I wondered about because, I mean, Maine is a very rural state predominantly, and it's a very white state. Right. And yet it's still, you know, and those are demographics that have fled the Democratic Party in most of the country. Probably like Maine and Vermont are some of the only exceptions to that. And yet obviously Democrats can and do still win in the state of Maine. So I was curious about what has kind of kept that politics together.
I think part of it is the fact that Mainers are, even a lot of conservative Mainers still kind of have a distrust of like the system and the ultra wealthy. There is the residual kind of leftovers of what the Democratic Party used to be, and in my opinion should be again. There is, but there's also, I would say, like a social progressivism, even amongst, a lot of conservatives I know are also pro-gay marriage, and you know, they don't care about, like, their conservatism is, it's around guns. It's around, weirdly at this point, like this kind of Trump-style anti-establishment element, which I actually think is why like a working class-oriented message works really well. I mean, I know guys who will literally say things like, "Can't stand Bernie Sanders. He's a communist, but I still love him. He still cares." And you're like, okay. These are guys who like love Donald Trump. So there's still a fair amount of that up here. And then there's also just the fact that Southern Maine at this point is kind of a more like standard, like liberal hub, and there's a lot of voters down there. So,
well, sorry. I was just saying, I have a quick follow-up.
Go ahead.
Just on like the culture question, Crystal's question about how to keep this together. Like I saw your Instagram post about not, and this is as the populist left kind of reckons with what's happened over the last 10 years, the idea of like what to do on trans issues and immigration issues. I saw you posted on Instagram that you have no intention of throwing trans kids under the bus or, immigrants under the bus, that sort of thing. But how do you talk to people who disagree with you completely? Like Janet Mills is getting sued by the Trump administration over the idea of whether trans athletes like should be able to compete in women's sports. And that matters a lot to a lot of like Trump curious Mainers whose trust you need to win over. Same thing with like Bernie came out and said Trump did secure the border when he was on Tim Dillon's show. So how are you navigating those conversations? Because that can't be
not easy, but also,
Graham, let me add an audience question to that, because there's one that really lines up with this. I'm not going to do the guy's handle because it's inappropriate for a family show, but he says, where they say, love your left populist economics, but can't stand your dogged refusal to moderate on unpopular culture war issues. How is protecting women's sports, shelters, and prisons from opportunistic males, quote, throwing trans people under the bus, unquote? How is ensuring we have a functioning border and limiting illegal immigration, quote, throwing immigrants under the bus, question mark? And no, I do not support Trump's policy either. So to kind of dovetails with what Emily was asking.
On the immigration front, we need to have a total overhaul of immigration policy in this country. The foundations of it were written in the 70s, and we only did some overhauls in the 90s, which frankly weren't even that intense. We are living with an immigration structure that was built for a world that we no longer inhabit, and we're going to continue running in and this is why people are like, oh, Obama did this and Biden did this and Trump did this, and when you look at it in the aggregate, there aren't that big of changes because the law never changed. I think that we do need to have a legal pathway to citizenship for people who've been here for ages. I'm sorry, rounding them up and throwing them out is not going to happen. It's not. And also it's, as we are seeing right now, the doing of it is pretty unconscionable. But that doesn't mean that we don't have a border. And that doesn't mean we don't have an effective system. We need to have a system that is, I would say, reflective of the needs of our time and the realities that we live in. And it's going to require more judges. It's going to require more courts. It's going to require more energy and time to adjudicate, whether it's asylum cases, whether it's people with illegal applications. But we've never been able to do that because there's been no coherent overhaul of the underlying policies. And what I mean by not throwing immigrants under the bus, I'm not saying that we don't have to overhaul our immigration system. We absolutely do. I don't think the answer there is armed, masked men kidnapping people off of work sites. And I'm going to say that I think that's a good idea. I'm never going to, I refuse. I mean, that's just authoritarianism. That's garbage. And it's also, in my opinion, unconstitutional. So we shouldn't be doing that. On the issue around trans people, I do not believe, and I think this is true for a lot of Mainers as well, because we have a real libertarian streak up here, including us lefties. It is not the role of the federal government to come down and tell people, tell communities, tell school boards, tell municipalities how to handle what are frankly often very complicated and nuanced discussions. We need to set standards when it comes to equality and decency and treating everybody like that. But I do not think it's the role of the United States Senate to go down into a municipality or go to a local school board and tell them how they're supposed to figure out what can frankly be deeply complicated discussions. That is not the role of the federal government. And I think that there are a lot of people who don't think that's the role of the federal government. I also think, and I'll just be very upfront, that this continues to get pushed and pushed and pushed as this huge discussion so we don't talk about universal health care. So we don't talk about the fact that we need to remove the cap on Social Security, or that we need to raise taxes on, frankly, pharmaceutical companies and big agricultural corporations that have just been building an apparatus that screws working people constantly for their own benefit. We don't talk about that stuff because we spend all this time talking about things that I think are nuanced discussions that should be left up to municipalities. Again, it doesn't mean that that doesn't mean the federal government comes down and says, hey, municipalities can just do whatever they want and we can treat people unequally. We need to set basic constitutional standards. But these are complicated discussions, and I don't think it's the role of the U.S. Senate to have them.
We got a whole bunch on your service and then also your time with the Blackwater offshoot, what Constellus, I think it was called. One of them, so from Halal Flow, says, how does someone with your worldview end up working for Blackwater? I think a lot of people on the left would find that helpful to hear. They're worried you might be another Fetterman. Man, Fetterman is haunting.
There's a lot
I
of
know.
trauma.
So much
I
trauma.
feel it too. There's a lot of trauma
Interesting.
there.
He says, but I don't think you are. There were already signs of who Fetterman was when he was running and
There you
caving
go.
to DMFI, pro-Israel lobby.
Mm.
Yeah, not to mention that whole incident where he like tried to murder a random black guy in his
There was
neighborhood.
that.
there
Not
was,
mentioned
that was
enough.
kind
There
of a
was
red
that as
flag,
well.
maybe
Not
a
mentioned
little more. He said you touched on this a bit during your last appearance on the show when you talked about your U.S. military service, but we didn't go into much into this, the State Department security contractor. So, who did you work for, and why, and for people who are skeptical of American empire, why should that not be disqualifying?
So, I never worked for Blackwater. This is I've been, like, I see this everywhere, and I'm always like, oh, for God's sake. The company that we all know is Blackwater, the one that Jeremy Scahill wrote about back in the late 2000s. That company, Eric Prince's little kind of warlord fantasy, that company essentially went away after 2012, and it was sold. I forget who bought it. There were several iterations afterwards, similar, like same facility down in North Carolina. And this is something that I think gets lost in all of this. The State Department has contracts for high threat security. They don't do it in-house. And the contracts were written with very specific requirements about what kind of training people have to receive, what kind of background they have to have. It's all around combat backgrounds, combat arms, special operations, infantry, that kind of thing. And so they've maintained those contracts. There were only a few companies for a long time who could meet any of those requirements. Triple Canopy, Blackwater back in the day, and then the Academy afterwards, Z, SOC, SMG. There were a number of these outfits, and because they were the ones who had the training facilities, they knew how to meet the contract requirements. There's a story in all of this that I think often gets lost, which is that after Blackwater folded, hedge funds started buying all of it up. And because they essentially saw, like, if you can have all the companies, then you can set your price. You're the only ones that have the ability to meet the contract requirements. By the time I got around to doing this, which is 2018, so I left the Army in 2012. I frankly didn't know what to do with my life for the next 6 years. And in 2017, I was back in Maine, utterly lost, had left college, didn't know what I was doing, but I was fully qualified to go work for the State Department in Afghanistan. And I had a lot of friends who were on that contract. And so essentially a friend of mine hit me up on Facebook and was like, hey, dude, what are you doing? I'm like, honestly, man, I have no idea. I'm lost. I can't figure out where I fit in this whole thing. And he was like, I mean, come on over and get on the AMBO's detail. And, it's the money's okay. We don't do, like, we did nothing. I mean, this is by 2018.
Yeah, we talk about what you actually did, because people think of it as like you went out there and you're shooting kids.
Mercenary,
for the record, all of that used to happen back in the late 2000s. Like all the horror stories from that shit are true. Sorry, all that it is there, but there's also a reason why the hammer came down, because that stuff happened. By the time I get there, essentially it's this, like, it's a corporate money grab. And like, they use guys like me with these backgrounds to meet the contract requirements so they could pay us bare minimum and walk away with the balance, which is frankly what everything in Afghanistan was by 2018. The whole thing seemed to exist purely to move taxpayer money into the pockets of defense contractors. I was a driver on the ambassador's advanced security team. So I would go to a venue before the AMBO would go, and I drove the vehicle, and guys on the team would make sure that everything was set up, and he'd be able to walk in the door and meet the people. It was all, in 2018, we were barely leaving the green zone. We didn't, I mean, look, I was there for 6 months. I mean, I probably went on like 12 or 13 moves. All I did was lift weights and play video games. And I got huge, and I played a lot of Far Cry.
Far Cry. Okay, nice. Which
For
one?
the Montana one, the one that was all pretty
Oh,
fun.
okay. Yeah.
It was deeply boring, and which was, I mean, for me at that point was good, because I was like, I was over looking for excitement. I was just trying to figure out what it was, the only skill I had. And so but 6 months, I actually, honestly, 3 months into it, I was done. I was like, this is such a waste. And then there was this other element where there I am at the embassy, like watching the embassy staff and watching the ambassador and the generals and the NATO staff and the UN staff, and no new ideas. I hadn't been in Afghanistan in 7 years. And there I am 7 years later at with access to all the brain trust. Nothing had changed. Same nonsense.
Wow.
And I was like, we are going to lose this war. And when it collapses, it's going to be a mess. Now, I don't want to say I was right, but and I didn't want to be there when that happened. But two, I was like, there's no purpose to this. Nobody has any idea. Like, the embassy is constantly under construction, because there's always some new security threat that we have to pay somebody. Some contractor comes in and has the whole thing was just a scam. It's just one huge scam paid for by tax dollar money. And I wanted no part in it. So I quit. I was only there for 6 months. I quit and I moved back to my hometown and I became an oyster farmer. And I'll be honest, until this stuff happened, I had no intent on ever looking back, because I was done.
You said someone approached you about running. Who was it? Who was it that approached you? And
so the past
you?
couple of years, I've done a lot of community organizing. After I left Afghanistan, I got real disillusioned and thought there was no value in anything. And that made me essentially sink all of my time and energy into living in a small town, which ironically then rebuilt.
You've mentioned the community organizing. What can you be more specific? Like, what'd you do?
I was an organizer with the local group called Acadia Action. And we focused on, I would say, like, building basic organizational capacity in the county I live in, getting people connected, getting people engaged with mutual aid projects, getting people engaged with identifying local races and finding candidates that people could run, but locally, all like local school board stuff, select board, that kind of thing. And really, honestly, for me, I read No Shortcuts by Jane McAlevey a few years ago, and then took Organizing for Power a couple times, got really into this idea of on-the-ground power building, and I just didn't see it I didn't see an existing structure.
That's a labor training session, right?
Yeah, it's a labor organizing training. But I just took that into my community, because where I live, labor organizing is fairly hard, because everybody has like 7 jobs. It was doing that I got connected with a lot more people around the state in labor and in like kind of statewide organizing around economic justice issues. And there was unbeknownst to me, there was a move to try to find a candidate to run who came from like a working background, who was a normal person living a normal life, to run on kind of an economic populism. And Maine is tiny and everybody knows each other. At some point, somebody's like, you should go talk to Graham and Sullivan. And so they did. And my wife and I initially told them to get out of our house, because the whole concept is insane to us. I mean, my wife and I have built a very idyllic but very small and simple life. We do not make a lot of money. We weren't trying to. We run a very small oyster farm that is focused on, frankly, like a high quality product. We do a lot of tours. I like the ecotourism side, because I think bivalve aquaculture is one of the most fascinating things I've ever been involved in. And I want to tell everybody about it. And when I go to the US Senate, everyone's going to have to hear about mussels and oysters for the rest of time. I can't wait for that. But when this idea came to us, the thing that we realized is that as people who've dedicated a lot of time past couple years to organizing in our community, that this is an organizing opportunity, that this is not about just winning a Senate seat. This is about actually injecting I would say like the mechanics of on the ground power building around working class issues that I have been waiting for and wishing to God existed my entire life, essentially. And
And to
we didn't go looking for it. It literally showed up at our doorstep. But we recognize that if we don't take this, we had this moment of like, do we believe in what we believe? And
to Crystal's question, who was that showed up at the doorstep?
it was a combination of folks. Some folks I knew from labor, people affiliated with the AFL, and then there was some input from people who had worked on Dan Osborne's campaign, who were the whole kind of project trying to do something similar. So,
Interesting.
I heard from people on Dan Osborne's campaign who flagged your campaign for me, so that actually tracks. Yeah.
Graham, I share your sense that the moment is right for your politics, which of course very much similar to my politics. But obviously you had that same inkling. What do you think has struck a nerve or hit a chord in Maine? Because I think it's pretty undeniable at this point. I mean, here you are 10 weeks into a race. You're, according to a lot of polls, up on the sitting governor of Maine, certainly competitive with the sitting governor of Maine. We all watched your town hall after your scandal broke. There's 700 people. There's overflow capacity. It's literally in a town of just over 2,000 people, like totally insane. So there's clearly something happening here. To what do you attribute that energy?
The material conditions for regular people are getting worse. Like here in Maine, our hospital system is legitimately collapsing. It's not academic. It's not theoretical like it's going to happen a year from now. Hospitals are closing now. People cannot get access now. Elderly people are dying in their homes in undignified, horrific ways alone right now because there is no support for them. That's happening. It's happening, and people continue to be told by the kind of, I would say, the establishment political system that things are still actually okay all in all, that we don't need to try anything new, that really what we need to do is kind of double down on sort of more corporate establishment Democrats, but not even that. I mean, just kind of the whole thing is like everybody sees what's happening. Everybody can like witness. Everybody's watching videos of masked federal agents kidnapping people. They're also watching their neighbor like die alone in their house. They're watching their ability to have access to healthcare happen. They're watching the Trump administration talk about starting a new war with Venezuela. They're watching the establishment Democrats continue to like not do anything about anything. And the reason I think this is all happening right now is I just came along and told everybody that what they were seeing was happening because it's what I'm seeing. And people hate getting lied to. They hate getting told that like there's a different reality happening than the one that they are witnessing. It's like Gaza. You know, you got the Democratic Party telling people for years now, like, no, this is fine. And everybody's like, I'm watching videos of children starving to death and getting ripped apart by American bombs. Don't tell me this is fine. I think you can just extrapolate that out to the larger system. And that's where the energy is. People are angry and they are sick and tired of this. And there is an irony for me. Like I've been saying this stuff for like the past couple of years. And like, you know, I could say this in a bar and somebody would be like, yeah, man, sounds wild. But then I do it on a Senate campaign and people are just like, yeah, absolutely. I mean, this reflects exactly what I'm seeing. And I think that, yeah, I think just the material reality that we are living in is what is driving all of this.
Yeah.
We have a question here from, oh, sorry, go ahead, Crystal.
I was just going to real quick add, we have seen some public polling. Do you have any, what are your internal polls or do you have
We don't have any
polls
yet. I'm going to be
point?
entirely frank. The last 2 weeks, I have barely slept. I am like.
You're very coherent for that. So
we are in the midst of doing all of that. We also,
You're fielding a poll.
And we are in the midst of fielding a poll. We also have, I mean, again, this is something I want to kind of reiterate. I know from the outside, this whole thing looks like big and real. We are 10 weeks in, and I've never done this before. So we essentially threw everything at the wall for 8 weeks. We built an immense amount of momentum. We built a substantial war chest. We kind of fleshed things out. Last 2 weeks, we essentially have made contact with our opposition. We had our first kind of stress test. There were people on the campaign that frankly weren't kind of up to the task, and they are now gone. The bulk of the campaign is very much still here, and I think in many ways this has kind of galvanized everybody. So we were planning November is when I sink my oyster farm. I have to go. Actually, when we get off the phone, I'm going back to go out on the boat. So we were planning for November to be kind of a slowdown period where we take all the connections and the resources and the information, the visibility, and now we coalesce it into an actual structural campaign based around movement building, based around organizational capacity. That's the project that we are engaged in right now. So I want to reiterate, because a lot of people are like, where's your policy team? I'm like, dude, I'm driving all over Maine and I haven't had 5 minutes to myself, and we're only 8 weeks in. Go ask one of the other candidates in this race who's been in it since April where his is. He should have a better excuse.
Go ahead, Griffin.
He's too busy running scam packs.
That takes a lot of time, Crystal. So we want to hit you. We've got a lot of other audience questions, so we're going to do some rapid fire ones really quick with you, Graham. But this one actually comes from me first. I wanted your take on Pete Hegseth, his renaming of the Department of War. He routinely calls the soldiers war fighters, is kind of like his coined term. And he's made a lot of talk about women and trans people in the military and their place. What do you make of that?
Pete Hegseth is a deeply insecure man who did a highly unimpressive military career and wants everybody to think that he was some kind of god of war, which he most certainly is not. He was an infantry officer who doesn't even have a ranger tab. So pardon me while I don't think the man deserves an ounce of respect. Now, all of this is just masculine insecurity, and he never should have been confirmed in that role.
All right. So we've got a few others here. Now, this one is a Sauger related question. Sauger referred to you as a Brooklyn leftist.
And a Hicklib.
Interesting.
And a Hicklib.
He's shifted from Hicklib to now Brooklyn leftist. Okay. Yeah, that's the tag now.
This is from Cade M. I'm sure this will be asked about how does Graham respond to Sauger's characterization of him as being no different than a Brooklyn leftist?
Well, I've never lived in Brooklyn.
Strong start.
And my politics really developed more coherently since I moved back to small town Maine. So I don't know. Seems like an insane thing to call me, but.
Are you still pro-gun, Graham?
I was going to ask, because we have this question from Hunter, who says, Hunter Shade says, Mainer here. My question for Graham is about a Second Amendment support. Would you vote along party lines on issues of gun control, or is this something you feel strongly enough about to buck the party trend? And what is your position generally on civilian gun ownership? Also, could you give a little background, your side, to the, quote, militia training accusations I've seen in the news? I'm assuming that's the Socialist Rifle Association picture that's been going around. What do you make of all that, Graham?
Well, Emily, the last paragraph's good too, actually, of that one. Do you have that?
Yeah, it says I've lived in Maine my whole life and know the gun culture is stronger than most New England states, but do you think your position on firearm ownership will help or hinder your endeavors in the state, given most of the population lives in York and Cumberland counties, which do not have the same gun culture as, say, Aroostook County?
Aroostook, it's okay.
This is our Brooklyn leftist.
I'm literally in Brooklyn right now, okay? And I don't claim you. I don't claim you here, okay? You're different than me.
Firearms have been a entrenched part of my life since I was a kid. I grew up in rural Maine. I grew up hunting. I grew up shooting. I learned how to shoot at 4-H. I joined Marine Corps. I joined the infantry. Yeah, I mean, I and then after that, I've been a firearms instructor. I still am a firearms instructor. And I'm I do competitive pistol shooting. It's my hobby. Firearms remain to be a fairly, I would say, intrinsic part of my life. And That's how it is for a lot of people in rural Maine. I come from a firearms owning tradition that is based around competency and responsibility and safety. I get a chuckle out of the whole me training paramilitaries thing. In 20, I don't know if anybody remembers, but in 2020, COVID happened, and a whole bunch of people bought a bunch of guns. People who had never owned guns before.
That's right.
All these like left wingers, progressives, Democrats, everybody's like the world is falling apart.
LGBT.
As someone
Yep.
who has spent a long time working with firearms professionally, I saw a bunch of people who, frankly, I was like, you should not own a gun. And if you're going to own a gun, you need to understand how to own a gun. And so I taught, and like there are a lot of people I would say on the left or progressive spaces who see gun culture as really scary. Like they don't want to go to gun shops. They don't want to hang out with people that usually teach firearms. And so I taught essentially an introduction to firearms course for a bunch of first-time gun owners, some of which had come through the SRA, which is, I mean, it's also funny. The SRA was like an online meme that turned meetups. People are like, it's like the left-wing NRA. I'm like, I mean, okay, not in my experience. It was mostly just a bunch of people posting at Discord servers, but like, whatever. I would do that again. I mean, I'm a firm, guns are tools and they're incredibly dangerous. And they are not to be viewed as toys. They are not to be viewed as extensions of like your masculinity. They're not going to make you inherently safe. In fact, having them makes you far less safe. Having a gun in your house increases the likelihood of gun violence in your house essentially exponentially, because if it wasn't there, it wouldn't happen. So I'm a firm believer that if people in a country that is awash in guns like ours, if you are going to be around firearms in any way, you need to get competent professional training in how to use them. And that was what I was trying to do. I will not walk that back. I think teaching people how to safely handle firearms is a good thing.
That's awesome.
Cool. Speaking of Discord and old post, this is from Sorota554. For Graham, one of the posts that came out from the referred to yourself as a communist. My question as a communist myself is, do you still consider yourself a communist? And if not, why not?
No, and I'll be honest, I've never considered myself a communist. Arguing with people on the internet and calling oneself a communist to piss them off is something I used to do.
Copy that.
I mean, like, there is of course, I'm advocating for universal health care and like the ability of working people to organize and build unions. Of course, somebody's going to call me a communist. So I used to just make jokes about this stuff long before. I mean, if you read the threads, by the way, it's fairly obvious I'm being a sarcastic dude, but whatever.
Yeah. Graham, I don't want you to read my old post I've deleted, so we'll leave it there on that one. This one comes from Faraz Abu Zaid. Graham, you said you wouldn't support Chuck Schumer for Democratic leader of the Senate. Is there anyone you would endorse? More broadly, what current senators do you admire, respect, or see yourself working closely with should you be elected?
I honestly, I've thought about this. I don't know who I would want to push for leadership because it's going to depend on kind of the general feeling. I will say, I have an immense amount of respect for Chris Van Hollen. I think he understands his role in the Senate in ways that I look up to, which is that you have structural power, but you also have secondary power. I think Bernie understands this too. And Elizabeth Warren as well. Like there is a secondary power. There's the power that comes from you being visible as a senator. Like when Chris Van Hollen went down to El Salvador to interview Kilmar Abrego Garcia, he got to do that because he's a U.S. senator. If he was anybody else, he would not have been able to do that and bring visibility onto that. And I think he understands his role in the Senate in a way that I would like to see more senators understand it. Not necessarily like you have to bring almost an element of activism to it as well if you're going to utilize the role in all of its power. And so I think so I have an immense amount of respect for him, immense amount of respect for Senator Warren, Senator Martin Heinrich has been a real cheerleader for me throughout this whole thing, incredibly supportive. there is a, I mean, I could just keep going down the list. Ed Markey, Peter Welch. Yeah, like there's but
You got some guys. There's some guys there.
Yeah.
But
yes.
it's
Van Hollen's been important on Gaza also using that visibility as well.
He understood his role. He could go do what he did. If he was not a U.S. senator, nobody would have cared if he went and walked the line. But he's a senator, so they have to.
Mm-hmm. Okay, our last and most important question from the AMA. This is from Sciatica Man 808. Was Ryan Grimm a good bartender tipper? Okay.
Oh, you actually remember serving Ryan? This is great.
Yeah, we have
incredible.
We've connected over our mutual tune-in time. So
tune-in is the best.
It's a great bar.
Well,
great bar.
Ryan and I are also we're Chesapeake Bay people, so we have some connection to the mollusk, the pro mollusk.
Someday, if you guys would have me, someday I want to come back on and just talk about aquaculture, but that's a whole one.
We would love that.
Yes.
Sagar had an oyster bar at his wedding, and the oysterman sniped at me one time, and it soured me on oysterman.
Oh no! Well, hopefully,
I
will say this: maybe next year when the weather turns, you should come up. I'll take you out on the oyster farm, and we can rebuild some trust with the bivalve mollusk community. So
that sounds awesome.
That would be the best breaking points ever.
Awesome. We'll all go. Maryland has done a great job funding aquaculture to clean up the Chesapeake Bay, but could use federal help for sure.
And I'm a firm believer, frankly, that using aquaculture projects as environmental rehab projects is highly underutilized. There's a lot of potential there, but we also, frankly, we don't have like a big lobbying wing, so we don't get anything.
Now, you were on David Sirota's podcast last night, and people should go and watch that one. I think it was instructive. And you were asked this, but I wanted to ask again for our audience as well, because this is something that people are very curious about. One of the more disturbing Reddit posts that people have circulated talks about, it's a question: if you could fight in previous wars, what would you do? And you talk about kind of the joy almost of combat. And I think, so can you talk about like how you got into a mindset where you believed that, and whether you still share that mindset, whether you're in touch with it, and how that relates to your current posture towards American imperialism and wars in general, because we're talking about people getting killed.
I viewed myself for a long time as a professional soldier. It was my identity. I was a very competent soldier. I saw a fairly significant amount of combat. I also, and I mean, this is a weird, I still work on, I'm going to work on this till I die, I think. I still have I have a very complicated relationship with my time in combat, because I think it was all for nothing. I think the horror and the violence that I took part in was completely pointless. And yet I still have this element of me that when I was engaging in it, I found infantry combat very exhilarating. I found infantry combat, I found my proficiency in being an effective soldier in combat as something that I was very proud of it. And I, in some ways, enjoyed it. But I want to make it clear, people, I think, I never enjoyed or relished in killing, ever. But it was more like the professional challenge of other people are trying to kill you, and then you have to make decisions and be effective in your weapon systems, be effective in your leadership in order to survive and then like win. And that was how I always viewed it. And the thing that I connect with now is that when I look back through history, I see a lot of people who, like me, engaged in wars of imperialism, wars of colonialism, who that experience in many ways, shapes, and forms, turned them into dedicated opponents to it. One of the reasons I am in such opposition to this stuff now, I know how easy it is as a young person who wants to go do this kind of thing for whatever reason, how easy it is to be taken in by it. I mean, and that's why we shouldn't do it. Because there will always be young men and women who in their youth are going to be taken into being part of something bigger, finding meaning in struggle and suffering and all that stuff. And if that's going to happen, that should never be taken advantage of by a political apparatus, which is exactly what happened. It's what happened to me. And I struggle with it. I'm going to struggle with this until the day I die. I don't think there's an answer in here, because I will always find some connection and some, I don't know, feelings of self-worth in how good of a soldier I was. But I also think it was all pointless. And it's, and I'm doing better with it now. I mean, for a number of years there, I mean, it sent me into a dark place because I couldn't square the two, and I still can't square them. But I think, frankly, developing a more structural critique has allowed me I'm like, oh yeah, right. I did this for the service of something I was not in charge of. And that kind of, I'm not trying to get myself off the hook. It's just that there is a way of describing it where I don't have to feel I no longer require it to have meant anything. It doesn't mean it no longer has to have value to me. I think it was valueless, and I'm okay with that.
One of the generals who participated in a lot of those small wars that you mentioned was Smedley Butler.
One of my personal heroes, unsurprisingly.
Yeah. So have you read Wars of Racket? What was your reaction to it?
Oh, no. I mean, Smedley Butler's been a hero of mine for a long time. And his support for the bonus army, his time, his time ratting out the business plot. I mean, I'm a big Smedley Butler fan. But Smedley Butler got there because of his combat record. I think it is. I don't want to.
That's interesting.
Yeah. Right. He participated in some horrifying war crimes.
Yeah, everybody should go read Gangsters of Capitalism by Jonathan Katz. Great book.
Mm-hmm.
Ryan has a good podcast on Smedley Butler back from
it was with actually the author of Gangsters of Capitalism.
Great book.
Jonathan Katz. That's right.
All right. Well, on that note, I think we're all set. Graham, thank you for giving us so much of your time today,
pleasure.
Being open to answering all of our questions, and we'll continue to follow your race.
Yeah. Happy Halloween. And, we'll just let you get back to your very quiet, idyllic,
actually today,
low stress life.
Today and tomorrow I get to go out on my boat. So things get pretty nice for a bit. Yeah.
Nice. Awesome.
That's awesome.
All right, Graham.
Thanks
Great connecting with you. Thank you so much for answering all our questions.
Yeah.
Thank you. Seriously.
I appreciate it.
Hey, if you like that video, hit the like button or leave a comment below. It really helps get the show to more people.
And if you'd like to get the full show ad-free and in your inbox every morning, you can sign up at breakingpoints.com.
That's right. Get the full show, help support the future of independent media at breakingpoints.com.